children, all the children of the light. Red, brown, yellow, black, and white, they are precious in His sight. Jesus answered, our children of the wild. My Jeff was 2.5 when his brother was born hydrocephalic. We were sharing with a friend who was a therapist shortly after he was born, and we said, we're praying that Justin's handicap won't affect Jeff. Our friend wisely said, then I would suggest that you quit praying. Now, that doesn't sound very wise at first glance, but he went on to say, if a normal child had been born into your home, it would affect Jeff. To think that a handicap won't is to pray the prayer of denial. And God cannot answer that prayer because God always walks in truth. Now, if you love a child and if your heart is broken, that child's heart is broken too. So let's take a look at some typical grief reactions of children. The age of innocence is from birth to age 2, and we think, oh my goodness, they're so young they won't even remember. Well, current research says that memory is implanted in the last trimester of pregnancy. There is no such thing as a child unaffected by loss that directly affects them. Children in that age group will likely, as adults, have to work through issues of fear of abandonment. My father left when my mother was barely pregnant with me. I've had to deal with fear of abandonment for most of my life. Ages 3 to 5 are an unusual one too, because that's the age of guilt. You would think, oh my goodness, how could a small child be guilty? And yet that's when we teach them good, bad, no, don't, stop. And with that knowledge comes guilt. These children will likely have to work on trust. When I was working on my book, I received an email from a lady who said, I just resigned my job as a nurse. When I was a little girl, I was playing with the hose in the backyard. I left the hose out, and later that day my grandpa fell and died. I blamed myself. I felt guilty all my life for that. It's why I became a nurse, when I finally realized that that wasn't why my grandpa died at all, and could let go of that guilt. I realized I didn't really want to be a nurse, so I changed professions. Ages 6 to 8 is the age of sadness. These children know that it's true. They're not involved in the fantasy anymore. And the fact that there is a loss, a death in their family is just sad to them, and they don't know how to cope with it. So these children have a tendency to deal with depression for a good part of their adult life and to learn to cope with it. Ages 9 through 12, the preteen years, are in what we call the age of anger. They know it wasn't their fault. They know that something awful has happened, but they don't know what to do about it, and so they are angry. My nephew was in this age when my mom died. At the funeral, I sat beside him and I said, are you sad because Grandma died? And he said, nope, I hate her. Well, I just hugged him tightly because I knew that was a normal response for his age group. They're in the age of anger. They will likely be called the little daddy, the little mama, and placed in a premature adult role. So they have to go back as they grieve to learn to be children again. The teen years are what we call the age of false maturity. Teens typically go through an adult grieving process. However, they're not adults yet emotionally, and so they don't quite know how to cope with it. There is danger of them getting into adult problems, sexual promiscuity, drugs, alcohol, overspending. We need to help them learn to cope. Young children don't hide much of what they're feeling. You hear it
You see it. All you have to do is look at their faces, and you know pretty much what's going on with them. Unfortunately, we've scolded them so much that by the time they become teenagers, they've learned to hide what's going on inside them. Very sad commentary, but when we look at a teenager's face, we have no idea of what's really going on or what they're really thinking. For that reason, we need to be very wise in dealing with them, and we need to know to watch for signs they're in trouble. Take a look at their drawings. When they draw about death or violence, when they're cruel to other children, when they're cruel to animals, that's not normal for a child. When they have phantom or copycat illnesses, when they have facial tics, body twitches, when their eyes cross or won't focus, that's a sign that they're in trouble, that they need extra help. As we went through our Justin's mini surgeries, trying to keep him alive, to keep him with us a little longer, my Jeff, 2.5 years old, got up one morning and his eyes had crossed. We panicked. We called the doctor. We got him in for help. We got him little pint-sized glasses. And we worked to deal with that issue. When a month after our Justin died, my husband and his daddy left. Jeff got up with his glasses on and his eyes had crossed again. I called the doctor and he said, "Oh my goodness, just give some extra love to the little guy and we'll get him through it." It was his grief reaction. He needed extra help. You also want to watch for extremes in behavior, obsessions, lethargy, hyperactivity, and get them help. After he was through college, Jeff and I co-authored a book, Take My Hand, Guiding Your Child Through Grief. I got to tell my mother's stories and teach from them, and Jeff wrote a coda at the end of every chapter as an adult sociologist about whom the story was written. I learned a lot working with him. One of the interesting stories in there is that in the aftermath of grief, little Jeff would go through what I now call a season of nightmares. He would wake up screaming and crying. I would bring him into my bed and comfort him and get through the night. And when that season ended, I would then try to get him back into his bed. Once after a season of nightmares, I tried to get Jeff back into bed, and he wasn't having it. So I went in and said, "Jeff, what's wrong?" And he said, "I'm all alone." And I said, "Oh, honey, you're never all alone because Jesus is always with you." I went back, kind of patting myself on the back for having waxed theological so effectively. A few minutes later, I heard this little voice from Jeff's bedroom saying, "Mom, I'm getting kind of tired of laying here with Jesus." We are the arms, the heart, the love of Jesus to our children. Comfort them through whatever they face.
Jesus loves you.